Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 23 preview where we'll be discussing some of the key players you should be looking to buy and sell in your FPL teams. If you do enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So I think probably the best place to start this week is with Liverpool because yes, the double game week isn't until game week 24, but in game week 23 they play against Ipswich at home. And here on this channel I talk a lot about entry points, and what we essentially mean by that is when is the ideal optimal fixture to buy into a player and to buy into a team. And whilst the double is next week, Ipswich at home is better than both games in the double. I mean, both games in the double actually aren't that great. Bournemouth away and Everton away under a new manager, they could be tricky games. Really, actually, 23 against Ipswich at home is the banker fixture. And I say banker fixture, it doesn't always go that way, but City have just put 6 goals past them themselves, and they're not in a particularly fantastic run of form. So it does really feel like, in an ideal world, if you are going to buy a Liverpool asset, buy a second, third, you really want to do it for game week 23. So that is the first school of thought, is that this is the week to do it. However, there is absolutely merit in getting a bit more information, because before the double game week, they've obviously got the Ipswich game, then they've got PSV. So it might be that you get a little bit more information from those two games. Let's say they pick up another injury in the attack. Let's say something happens, I don't know, Darwin picks up an injury and both Jota and Darwin are out. All of a sudden, not only does Gakpo's minutes look even better, maybe you then say, do you know what? Luis Diaz kind of has to start every game as well. So I think I probably am going to aim to pick up my third Liverpool asset for the Ipswich at home game because it is the best fixture. But if you would like to gather a bit more information, that is absolutely fine. One possibility, and I don't want to get into too many fine details here because there are lots of permutations for this, but if Spurs reach the EFL Cup final and Spurs and Fulham both blank in 29, which is a possibility, depending upon Spurs' progression in the UEFA Europa League, it could be that double game week 33 doesn't work very well for Spurs. So in fact, the double game week for Spurs and Fulham is actually brought forward to game week 25. It's not overly likely that that happens, but there is a possibility. If that happens, game week 24, assistant managership on Arne Slot, and then game week 25 on either Marco Silva or Ange Postecoglou could work really well, because what you're getting is a double followed by another double. In that situation, you might then regret having filled up with your third Liverpool asset, because it might be that you play the assistant manager chip on a slot. Essentially what I'm getting at here is whilst Ipswich at home is the ideal entry point, there is value to wait in. So I don't think you have to load up on a third Liverpool asset right now. A lot of you won't have Trent. We'll discuss in a second. I think going out and getting Trent as your second Liverpool asset makes a lot of sense, but it's really that third one. So that's the first. I've just made notes here because I don't want to forget anything. So I would go now, but there is merit in waiting. In terms of the Ipswich game, it feels relatively predictable, and these might be famous last words, what the lineup will be. So on your screen, you can see the lineup from the Lille game, which was on Tuesday evening. It was Alisson in goal, a back four of Bradley, Quansah, Van Dijk, Tsimikas, Szoboszlai, Gravenberch, Jones as the midfield, and then Salah, Darwin, and Diaz as the front three. In terms of minutes, Bradley played 86 minutes, and then Trent came on for the final few minutes. So Trent looks very, very likely to start Ipswich, and it does appear that Bradley will start the games where it's less important that they go out and get a win. Konate got a complete rest. Quansah started this one, so again, Konate should start. Robertson got a complete rest as well, with Tsimikas starting at left back. And then really it's the front three that we're paying attention to. So Salah got 90 minutes, but it's Mohamed Salah. Darwin got 90, and Luis Diaz got 75. Gakpo actually got an entire full rest. So I would be very surprised if Trent doesn't come back into the 11. I think Konate and Robertson will come back into the 11 as well. And I believe the front three will be Salah, Gakpo, Diaz. So if you wanted to go out there and get a Gakpo and a Diaz, it feels very, very likely that they start Ipswich. So that is a good thing. Beyond Ipswich, who knows, right? It depends upon injuries. It depends upon fatigue. There are so many games coming up. I've got their schedule on the screen. Ipswich on the 25th. Then a few days later, they've got the PSV game. Then a few days later, then Bournemouth. Then Spurs. Then Plymouth. Then Everton. Each of these separated by between 3 and 5 days. The very good thing, though, is that some of these games, they don't need to go full strength. Against PSV, they can rotate. Bradley can come back in. They can start Darwin once again. Obviously, they need to go full strength probably for Bournemouth and then Spurs in the EFL Cup semi-final second leg. But then they've got Plymouth Argyle. They don't need to go anywhere close to full strength against Plymouth Argyle. No disrespect to Plymouth. So it feels like whilst there are a lot of games coming up, they can rotate the team quite nicely. But again, it's very unpredictable whether a player might pick up an injury. And in between the Bournemouth and Everton games, there are 2 games. The Spurs second leg of the EFL Cup and then the Plymouth game. I'm just rambling at this point, but I guess all of this to say, I think I would ideally try and get a third asset this week, but if you want to wait, you can. The Jota injury does help, because whilst Darwin is playing a little bit better right now, and clearly he's getting more and more minutes, I still feel like Diaz and Gakpo are so comfortably first choice ahead of Darwin. Jota, on the other hand, I think Jota is probably their first choice number 9 if he was fully fit ahead of Diaz. And that was what was putting me off Diaz. And I thought, well, if Jota starts as the 9, well, then you could push Diaz out to the left, as we saw here. With Jota being injured, though, and it looks like he'll be injured, the first approximation is something like 3 to 5 weeks, so probably miss the double game week. I think it's going to be Diaz as the 9 and Gakpo off the left more often than not. All I will say about this Lille game is this has shown that Slot has the ability to play Darwin as the 9 and Diaz off the left. Right, so that's the first part of this, is just discussing their schedule, discussing the team, and saying that I think the Ipswich game is quite predictable. Let's look at some of the stats for the Liverpool players, and then I'll rank which Liverpool assets I would target for that third slot in your team. So just taking a look at some of the underlying statistics and projected points for those key Liverpool assets, and then my own ranking without being able to, of course, see your team. All of the data that I use in my videos is courtesy of Fantasy Football Hub. If you've ever wanted to access like XG, XA, projected points, if you want to look at the future fixtures and order them by difficulty, if you want to compare certain players, all of that lovely stuff you can do over on Fantasy Football Hub. So I'll link it down below in the description. You can get 30% off if you use my link. As we start to approach the double game weeks and you need to plan ahead, it is the perfect tool to use. So I've separated it, actually, rather than putting them in one table, I've separated them into 2. So the 4 defenders or defensive assets that I'd be looking at, and then Diaz and Gakpo, basically, because I think they are a different conversation, but I will rank them all together as well. On the defenders, I've got Trent, Van Dijk, Konate, Alisson. I probably wouldn't bother with Robertson or Tsimikas. I just think it's very difficult to predict who's going to start the majority of games. I think Robertson will start Ipswich based on the fact that Tsimikas has just played 90 minutes there or close to 90 minutes. But beyond that, I've got no idea. All you need is Robertson to drop one stinker and Tsimikas might start. All you need is Tsimikas to drop one stinker and maybe Robertson starts the majority of the game. So I probably wouldn't bother there. In terms of Trent, Van Dijk, Konate, Alisson, Trent is just comfortably the best asset there, even taking into account the amount that he costs, because they all have the same clean sheet potential, assuming they start the same amount of games. Trent's minutes do look very reliable. There was a lot of talk about, will Trent be dropped? Bradley is a fantastic alternative. Bradley still doesn't play many minutes in the Premier League. Trent got another 90 minutes again. He's elite. He was on the pitch right at the end of the game. That's how he got the assist. So not only does he have really good minutes and the same clean sheet potential, his baseline bonus points is higher because of the amount of creative work that he does. And also his expected assist is through the roof. 0.33. It's the best in the Premier League. If you look at the overall data for Van Dijk and Konate, it's not even close. Like, neither of those carry much goal threat or assist threat. So for me, Trent is absolutely categorically the best second Liverpool asset. Obviously, Salah isn't on this list, but I would say Salah, then Trent. You don't need me to probably tell you that. Beyond that, that's when it starts to get tricky. With the defensive assets, as I said, Van Dijk and Konate don't have much goal threat. 0.07 for Van Dijk, 0.08 for Konate. I made this point early on in the season, and Liverpool fans got very upset and started talking about how XG is a myth. Van Dijk doesn't carry the same goal threat that he used to. That isn't me sitting here and saying that Van Dijk can't score a bullet header or 2 in the next 4 games. Saliba's got terrible goal threat. Saliba scored 2 goals in consecutive games. So, yes, even though the XG isn't good, Van Dijk is still an absolutely massive unit and could definitely get on the end of a corner. But in the last 2 or 3 seasons, his data across the season hasn't been great. He's not scored as many goals as he did when he first joined Liverpool. So I would take that into account, that you are paying 6.4 million for an asset that really doesn't have much better goal threat than someone like Saliba. Like, it's nowhere close to the likes of Van Dijk or, sorry, not Van Dijk, Gabriel or Munoz, as an example. So I just think it's a lot of money to pay for me for Van Dijk. But what you get with Van Dijk is absolute security of minutes, plus the fact that historically he can get on the end of a corner. So I don't know, for me, Van Dijk's just a little bit uninspiring for that price. I'd be much more interested in Konate for 1.3 million less, especially considering he's got even slightly better attacking threat, but there's not much between them. The issue with Konate, Can he stay fit? And if he can stay fit, does he definitely start all of the games that you want him to in the Premier League, or could Quansah get a game? Now, with the way that the fixtures are scheduled, I actually think that Konate probably does start every Premier League game, and that you would expect Quansah to start PSV and Plymouth. That's a lot of puzz. So I think Konate is probably a really decent asset to have, assuming that he can stay fit. But whether he can stay fit is a completely different discussion. On Alisson, I really like Alisson as a pick, but that is in my specific situation. I have my team selection video tomorrow. I own Robert Sanchez. Robert Sanchez stinks, and he's got Man City this week. So as a result, switching from Sanchez to Alisson in a week where Alisson's got Ipswich at home and Sanchez has City away, it feels like a very easy switch to make. If you're sat there with Raya, who's got a decent fixture and playing for a good defence, or if you're sat there with Sells, or if you're sat there with Henderson, or one of the keepers that actually have decent fixtures and are playing for a decent defence, it makes it a little bit more difficult, because then at that stage you don't really have the option to move to Alisson. I don't think it makes as much sense. What I'm kind of getting at here is I think it really depends, who are you happy selling? Because I can sit here and say I think Alisson is a better player to buy than Van Dijk, because he's 0.9 million less, and Van Dijk doesn't have as much goal threat as he used to. Fine. But if you're sat there with Saliba in your team, who's injured, also doesn't have much goal threat, then you have a really easy route to Van Dijk. If you're sat there with, or keep you really happy with, like Sells, then you don't have an easy route to Alisson. So I think it really depends who you are happy selling yourself. For me, I'm much happier selling a goalkeeper than I am a defender. All of that to say, if I was to first rank the defensive assets, it's Trent, Alisson, Konate, Van Dijk. It's not that I think Van Dijk's bad, he's just a lot of money for what he's currently offering. So that's my current opinion on the defenders. On the attackers, I kind of have the same opinion as most people, which is Gakpo's minutes are absolutely the most secure. And the fact that he played 0 minutes in the Champions League further cements to me that his minutes in the Premier League look really, really good. I think he started something like 9 or 10 Premier League games in a row right now. And yes, he often doesn't get 90 minutes. He might come off between 60 and 70. But he's getting those starts on a consistent basis. And the returns haven't been bad either. A lot of people are talking about his home versus away form. Gakpo's away form this season hasn't been brilliant. I don't know. I don't always buy into home versus away unless I see it over a really long sample size. I think it's game state dependent as well. And he can absolutely score in away games still, so that wouldn't put me off too much. What would put me off slightly is he doesn't have the highest ceiling. Gakpo doesn't regularly go out there and get you goals and assists, like 2 goals and an assist. You don't really see that from him. Diaz does feel like he has a slightly higher ceiling. And when you look at the underlying data, his goal threat is higher. So 0.43 expected goals per 90, slightly lower assist threat, but he just feels like he's got that little bit more explosive ability on top of Gakpo. And obviously being a midfielder, extra point for a goal, extra point for a clean sheet. So as a result, he does have the ability to go out there and get more points. If you were to tell me that Diaz and Gakpo's minutes were exactly the same over this period, which I don't think they will be, I would prefer Diaz to Gakpo. But because I don't think their minutes will be the same, I think Gakpo's projected minutes are probably slightly higher, I would marginally favour Gakpo over Diaz. But once again, I come back to the same thing. It depends who you can sell. In my team, my front three is currently Isak, Mateta, Wood. As much as I would prefer Gakpo to Diaz, at the moment, I don't know that I can justify selling any of those three. They're all on penalties. They're all getting good minutes. They've all got decent fixtures as well. Even Wood, I don't think the fixtures are as awful as some people are suggesting. So it's very difficult to sell one of those three. Whereas in my midfield, I've got someone like Enzo Fernandez. If I could free up the funds to sell Enzo, I'd be very happy to do so. So Diaz might be more of an option. If you're sat there right now and you've got Solanke, well then obviously Solanke to Gakpo feels a lot easier. So it really is team dependent. And I think maybe more than going out there and trying to chase Gakpo over Konate, you should look at your own team and just think, what makes more sense for my structure? Because at the end of the day, after Salah and Trent, who for me, again, are comfortably the 2 best assets, there's not much to separate Van Dijk, Konate, Alisson, Diaz and Gakpo. There really isn't for me. I think you can see here, their projected points are all within about 4 of each other. There's not a lot. One of them will absolutely categorically outscore the others by some distance. There'll be one that goes ballistic, but guessing which one that will be, you don't know. It could be that Konate scores 2 bullet headers, and it's like, well, obviously you should have gone for Konate, but we can't predict that ahead of time. I will just say on the fixtures, it does favour the attackers for me, because I think Bournemouth and Everton away, they feel like tricky fixtures, especially with, obviously, Everton under Moyes right now. I don't know that there's great clean sheet potential there. And even Ipswich, I know they didn't score against City, but they're a team with the lap that can go and score goals. So I feel like they are probably more suited, those fixtures, for the attackers. So if I was to rank the assets right now, Salah, Trent, and for me, number 3 is Cody Gakpo. In an ideal world, if I was on a wild card right now, the 3 assets I would own is Salah, Trent, Gakpo. If you can't get Gakpo into your team, I then think it's extremely close between the other remaining 4 assets on this list. I think for security of minutes, for price, and the fact that he does make a decent amount of saves, I would marginally put Alisson in 4th. But again, if you've got a good goalkeeper, don't sell a good goalkeeper for Alisson. And then I would say it's probably Diaz, Konate, Van Dijk. And again, that's based on price alone. I don't think Van Dijk's a bad option. So to recap, Salah, Trent, Gakpo, Alisson, Diaz, Konate, Van Dijk. If you want me to rank the Liverpool assets, that's just my opinion. Look at your own team and decide yourself. Let me know. Will you own 3 Liverpool players for Game Week 23? And if so, who are they? So I didn't expect this to be something that I would be discussing anytime soon, but Cole Palmer is currently the 3rd most sold asset for Game Week 23. Yes, you're hearing that correctly. Most people selling him for Phil Foden, who in all honesty is going into one of the most difficult fixture runs you could possibly imagine, despite being in a great run of form. And by the way, I don't necessarily hate owning Phil Foden, but selling Cole Palmer for Phil Foden feels absolutely mental to me. I did just want to discuss him, though, because there has been a drop-off for both Chelsea, but also Cole Palmer as well. So, whilst I can sit here and say it's absolutely mental, I should at least discuss it. The other reason is the flavour of the week seems to be benching Cole Palmer, especially for those people that have 8 really good attackers. A lot of you will be sat there thinking, if I don't bench Palmer, I've got to bench someone like Wood or João Pedro against Everton. And whilst I think both of those are worth benching ahead of Palmer, I can understand that a lot of people are thinking, do you know what? In his current run of form, with City starting to pick up form as well, I could bench him. So let's discuss all of that. In terms of the fixtures, the reason I don't think it's worth selling Cole Palmer is because City-Chelsea can be a very high-scoring game. I still don't think City are fully there defensively. They've started to score goals. Phil Foden's looking good. They've got Mateus Nunes at right back who's unlocking Phil Foden. De Bruyne has been much better recently in terms of fitness and performance. Haaland's starting to find the net as well. So I think they'll score goals, and Chelsea aren't great defensively, but I do also feel like they still feel quite fragile defensively at the moment. So I would imagine there's a lot of goals in this game. Then you've got West Ham at home, who still look like they are susceptible to conceding goals under Potter. Then it's Brighton away, then Villa away. It's not an amazing run of 4 fixtures, but then in 27-28, it's the 2 best fixtures in the Premier League against Southampton at home and Leicester at home. So yes, you could conceivably sell Palmer for 4 weeks and then buy him back, but that's 2 transfers to do so. And who are you buying in those 4 weeks that is that much better than Cole Palmer? It's not for me. So categorically, no, I would not sell Palmer. Benching is possible, but I still wouldn't do it. But let's look at the data. So first 16, then last 6, just to see, is there a bit of a drop-off? So minutes-wise, his minutes have marginally gone up. In terms of FPL points and expected FPL points, there has been a drop-off. In terms of expected FPL points, there's only been a marginal drop-off, right? So we're not saying that his data has all of a sudden fallen in the bin, but he's obviously not overperforming at such a high level. He's only overperforming by 1 FPL point, whereas earlier on in the season, it was almost 2. The real difference is that Palmer appears to, and Chelsea fans will back me up probably on this, has just dropped a little bit deeper in some of the recent games, playing more of sort of a playmaker role, and especially I would say so in Game Week 22. Maybe it was the absence of Enzo Fernandez, but he was just playing a little bit deeper at points. I'm not saying he's playing like a 6 or even an 8. He's still playing as a number 10. But he's certainly dropping into pockets and trying to create. And maybe Maresca has said to him, listen, Cole, Chelsea aren't in a good place. We're not performing particularly well. We need you to drive a little bit of creativity from deep. So maybe it is a deliberate tactical thing, and maybe that could change. And this is the issue we have. I remember earlier on in the season, I was saying Solanke's basically playing like a defensive midfielder. He's dropping really deep. And then the next game, he was playing as a proper 9. And even since then, he's been playing much more as a number 9. All it needs is the manager to change it tactically, and Palmer might go straight back to playing in a really advanced role. But what this has meant is that his data has fallen in terms of goal threat. So in the first 16, it was 0.43 XG per 90, non-penalty, and now it's dropped to 0.28. By the way, that's still okay goal threat. That's definitely not bad goal threat. But for his price, I mean, arguably it is. You really do want a little bit more in terms of chances to score goals. So there's been a reasonable drop-off there in his goal threat, but there has been a reasonable increase in his creativity. And that's why his overall expected FPL points per 90 isn't down massively. So 0.38 expected assist in the last 6 versus 0.26 across the first 16. The only other drop-off is also in his big charts involvement. Now, this is also fluctuates based on penalties too, but 1.35 big charts involvement per 90 across the last 6 versus 1.81 in the first 16. And of course, in the first 16, it was more big chances for himself. Recently, he's been creating more big chances. So basically, yes, there has been a marginal drop-off in his data, but really it's been a shift from goal threat to assist threat. And I absolutely understand, by the way, that's not good. You get 2 less points for an assist than you do for a goal, right? 5 versus 3 for a midfielder. So you want him scoring goals. And as a result, no, I don't massively feel like captaining Palmer overly at the moment, although he has outscored Salah in a lot of recent weeks. But that doesn't mean that you necessarily go out there and sell him. On the benching, I would bench a lot of assets ahead of Cole Palmer still. I would still bench Rodgers ahead of Palmer, even though it looks like a good fixture on paper for Rodgers. I would bench João Pedro. I would bench Chris Wood. So unless you are telling me that your other 7 attackers don't include those assets and are just so elite for this week, like they've all got exceptional fixtures, I just don't understand benching Cole Palmer. This is the same asset that is like the 2nd or 3rd top scoring player in the game that can go out there and get 25 points in a game, and we're expecting it to be a bit of a goal fest. It's just not for me. So I wouldn't sell. I wouldn't bench. I definitely wouldn't sell. But if you want to bench and you want to take that risk, that's up to you. So whether you believe it or not, there is a lot of chatter at the moment around the Everton forwards in Calvert-Lewin and Iliman Ndiaye because they are both 5.4 million. They have okay fixtures, including a double game week with Leicester at home. And there's a new manager bounce under David Moyes. And overall, from an attacking perspective, Everton have looked a lot better across the last 2, considering one of them was Villa, one against Spurs, who, again, haven't been really good defensively themselves. But there are signs of improvement, and at least signs that they are trying to attack a little bit more. So I think if you are looking at that price, like below 5.5, really these are probably 2 of your better options. If you're sat there with João Pedro or Raul Jimenez, and you can't really afford to go up to someone like Chris Wood, Gakpo, Mateta or Wissa, all of which we'll discuss in the final section, but you want to change the forward spot, then yeah, I don't necessarily hate it. On the fixtures, I don't think they're as bad as they first look when you glance at them, because if you look at the fixture difficulty rating, most of them aren't green. In fact, the only green fixture is the Leicester at home one. So when you first glance at that, you might say, oh, the fixtures don't look great. But Brighton can definitely be got at. Leicester at home is a brilliant fixture. Really, the Liverpool at home fixture is just a bonus, couple of appearance points. Maybe you might get something. Crystal Palace have actually been defending quite well recently, but it's certainly a game you'd still expect chances. And then United and Brentford are back-to-back really good games. They also play against West Ham in blank game week 29, which is another really decent fixture. So I think overall, for the Everton forwards, these aren't terrible fixtures. At the same time, they don't scream tons of goals. The only really good fixture there, as I said, is the Leicester at home one in 24. On your screen, what I've decided to do is ignore season-long data, and I've only got data from the last 2. The issue with that is it's a very, 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 very small sample size, and therefore you can't glean too much from it. But I just feel like data under Sean Dyche is just relatively useless for us right now. I've also, as a result, only got their touch maps and their heat maps from the games under Moyes as well. So what we've basically got is just the data from the last 2. So as you can see, minutes-wise, they both look relatively nailed. Iliman Ndiaye got a slightly early sub in the game against Spurs. I think he came off in the 81st minute. But other than that, you would expect them to both start pretty much every game. I think that Calvert-Lewin is a proper Moyes forward. I think he's going to really enjoy having him in the squad, as long as he can stay fit, of course. In terms of FPL points, Iliman Ndiaye has obviously already outscored Calvert-Lewin, because Calvert-Lewin loves to miss a big chance. But then when we get into the actual data, only 2 games, right? Only 2. I need to keep emphasizing that. But the data has been ridiculous for Calvert-Lewin. In those 2 games, he's already on 1.51 total non-penalty expected goals, and he's already had 5 big chances. That is league topping. No one can beat his 5 big chances in the last 2. Now, will I expect it to continue at 2.5 big chances per 90? No, that's absolutely ridiculous. Like, even Haaland in his peak is only just about reaching that. But clearly, Moyes is setting up in a way to feed Calvert-Lewin. Iliman Ndiaye, I think, is comfortably a better footballer. Like, if you're asking me who I would rather watch and who I'd rather have in my team, it's obviously him. But you don't get extra points for being a good footballer. And I just think when I watch him, like, look at his heat map / touch map. There are touches in the box, and he will get attacking returns. But he's doing a lot of his best work almost in like a left mid position. he does get forward and he will create. And I think his creativity will probably shoot up, I would expect, due to the stuff that he can do with the ball at his feet. But I just feel like Calvert-Lewin is a better FPL asset. He's got much greater goal threat. I think he will continue to do so. His minutes are slightly better. And we are still expecting Calvert-Lewin to be first choice penalty taker. So I think, for me, Calvert-Lewin is the better asset to own. The only reason I wouldn't own him is if you think his finishing ability is that bad that it doesn't matter how many big chances he gets, or you think he won't be able to stay fit. Because obviously if his fitness drops off and he picks up an injury, then of course he's not a great option. And he does miss a lot of big chances. His conversion rate is still the worst in the Premier League of all forwards. That's not a good stat that you want for a player that you're bringing in. So if I was to rank them, Calvert-Lewin first, Ndiaye second. However, I'm not interested in either at the moment. I just think for me, it's worth spending extra on the forwards. I think even if you can get up to Wissa's a drastically better option than these, even considering the extra fixture, and he also plays in 29. If you can get up to Wood, Gakpo, Mateta, then again, they are significantly better options. The only reason that I think you should go for either of these assets isn't for the double, isn't for the fixtures, isn't for the new manager bounce, is because you literally can't afford any of the better forwards, or you would rather spend your money elsewhere. But for me and for a lot of people, I think you've already got 3 forwards that are more expensive than these guys here, so you probably don't need to go down to them. I'd love to know, is anyone interested in the Everton assets? For me, I would be surprised if I own an Everton player for Double Gameweek 24. So I know I've already discussed Gakpo in this video and also the Everton forwards too, but there are a lot of questions right now about the forwards. I think that's probably the major question outside of which third Liverpool asset to buy, is which forward should I go out and buy as well? And obviously, if we're looking at the next 3, it's difficult to get much better than Ipswich at home, a double game week, Wolves at home. So if you are targeting the near term, Gakpo just makes a lot of sense. Like, it's worth the risk, because even if he does get benched in one of the next 4, which, by the way, I don't think he will. I think he starts all 4. But even if he does, well, then fine. He's got the same 3 fixtures that everyone else has, plus maybe minutes off the bench in the 4th one. So it's not like he has fewer fixtures than someone like a Mateta, a Chris Wood, or a Wissa. So that's the first thing, is I probably would attack right now. If you've got that third Liverpool slot open, you've got the money to go for Gakpo, I would probably go there. But for some people, maybe you want to go for a defensive asset, maybe you want to activate the assistant manager chip, or you just aren't really sure if you want to go for a third Liverpool right now. I think it is probably Mateta, Wood, and Wissa who would be my top 3 options outside of that. I would actually say that Wood would be the least likely to come in for me if I was bringing in a forward this week. Now, I own Chris Wood. I brought him in 3 weeks ago, and he's got 4 attacking returns in 3 weeks. So I love the man. He's done very well for me. But you have to think about what's ahead. Like, you can't get those previous points. If you didn't have the 12-pointer, bringing him in right now doesn't get you the 12-pointer. You've lost that. And the next 6 fixtures are about as tough as you'd probably like to get. I mean, Bournemouth are a brilliant defence. Brighton, hit and miss, depending on which Brighton team turn up. But you'd expect that to be an okay game at home. Fulham are a really good defence. We've seen that recently. Another clean sheet for one of... I say another clean sheet. They've not really had many, but they are a top 8 defence in the league this season. Newcastle are a top 4 defence. Arsenal are first or second for expected goals conceded. City is showing signs of improvement as well. That is not a nice run of 6 fixtures. Now, on the flip side, Chris Wood's conversion rate is the best in the Premier League. Nottingham Forest are arguably maybe the second best team in the league at the moment. Arguably, you could even put them as the best team in the league at the moment. They're going for the title, which is ridiculous to say, but they are. And so maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the fixtures are less important. Chris Wood has shown this season, grabbing a goal against Liverpool, he can do it in the bigger games. I think Chris Wood is a fine hold. Like, I'm not suggesting you go out there and sell him, although I think it's a possibility if you want to move to Gakpo. But I don't know that I'd go out and buy Chris Wood right now. So I would actually have Chris Wood as the... I'm not going to say worst option of the 4, the least likely that I would bring in. I really, really like Wissa. I think Wissa's got a bit of everything you would want. He's the cheapest of the 4 players here. Brentford are an incredibly good attack. I love the fixtures over the next 4. I don't like Palace as much, but Spurs, West Ham, Leicester, they feel absolutely fantastic. Everton, Villa after that, both being at home. We know how good, obviously, they are at home. And I suppose that's the only slight concern, is that 3 of the next 4 are away. But the home versus away thing is slightly overdone. I think they've just had easier home fixtures than away fixtures this season, which is why there's such a disparity in the data. I think I would go for Wissa. If I was bringing the forward right now and it wasn't Gakpo, because I think Gakpo's the best, I think I would go to Wissa. Save the money on top of someone like a Jean-Philippe Mateta. Bring in an asset from a team that attacks so incredibly well is probably worth doing for me. The only small thing I would say is apparently Nottingham Forest have bid something like 22 million for Wissa. Brentford rejected that straight away. But if Nottingham Forest do manage to land him, then of course it's a different discussion because then he's playing for a different team. But yeah, I think for me, Wissa right now seems like the standout option if you're not going to go for Gakpo. Just on Jean-Philippe Mateta, I love him. Fixtures-wise, arguably as good as Liverpool and Brentford. Liverpool and, Brentford. So he's got Brentford at home himself this week. Feels like a good fixture. Then faces United, which is another really good fixture. Then Everton, Fulham, Villa. Those three aren't as easy, but then Ipswich in 28. In 29, he's likely to blank, and that is the only issue here is that he has a good chance of blanking in 29. But then in 30, he plays Southampton. So I think, especially if you free hit in 29, you can keep him through, and then he's got Ipswich and Southampton either side of that blank game week. So fixtures-wise, I actually think he's up there as one of the better options. I think if I was to rank these assets right now in terms of bringing in this week, I would probably say Gakpo, Wissa, Mateta, Wood. I think Mateta versus Wissa is very close, but for me, Gakpo is the standout forward if you've got that option available to you. Let me know what your front three is going into Game Week 23. My front three, you'll see obviously in my team selection video tomorrow, but I'm pretty happy with it as things stand. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 23 team selection. Hopefully you did enjoy, and if you did, please do smash that like button and make sure to subscribe as well. We are very close to 145,000 subscribers, but I can only get there with your support. I do really appreciate it. Until next time, which will be my team selection video tomorrow, thank you very much. Bye-bye.